Peace. Yo, could you hear me clear? Let me know. Peace. Okay, that's good. So I had some time this evening, and I wanted to just build about some of the keys of revolution, how to spot neverlutionaries, and just some other things that may come across my mind in the process of addressing those particular topics. So, what inspired me to even build about these topics is I get tired about what I see, especially on social media, and just seeing how easily manipulated people are. Peace, no doubt. Yeah, sometimes I get frustrated with seeing just how manipulated people are and easily led in the wrong direction, and really believing that some people really have their best interests at heart. When in reality, it's really just a form of social media psychopathy. People who really have no empathy, poor behavioral control, and they're deficient in terms of emotionally responding to people. A lot of the behavior that you see people expressing online is psychopathy. So one of the things that you may have heard me share before is about my background, my family dynamics. One of the things that I've shared before is that my parents were associated with the Black Panthers. And because of that association, they had a very keen view of what community outreach is, what youth advocacy is, and that really gave me a lot of context as well as my siblings in terms of the importance of being connected in your community and to your people and advocating for a common cause in terms of enhancing the quality of life of those who are around you. I had the privilege of growing up in an environment where my peers and my siblings' peers would visit our home, sometimes if we're not even there, in order to see my parents. Or if we as a family did things, we would incorporate some of our peers in those type of activities. My father was a father figure to many. My mother was a mother figure to many. One of the things that I also talked about is how my father was a tradesman. He also collected African artifacts, such as African masks and statues and spears and shields and a lot of those things. I grew up in a household with a red, black, and green flag that represented our identity as original people in the diaspora around the planet. the red, black, and green flag that was forged by the UNIA under Marcus Mosiah Garvey. That's the kind of flag that I grew up with seeing in my household, not an American flag. And my parents weren't anti government, they just understood the importance of our cultural competence and our heritage as a people. And they reinforced that not only with the resources and the materials in our own household, but exposing us to different places and events and activities that reinforce our identity. So I grew up, even though I experienced living in a society in a world that doesn't reflect a lot of the things that I was taught in my household, but I grew up understanding the importance of youth advocacy, community outreach, the value of identity. And none of this was coming from a religious belief perspective. It was coming from the perspective of cultural competence, learning what social justice actually is. One of the things that I've shared before as well is how sometimes my mother would put me and my siblings who were closest in age in the car and say, "Come on, let's go find our friends." And we would drive around our city when it started to rain, and we would look for people who would be homeless, and she would show us who they were. She would stop and point them out and just tell us, "Okay, you see your friends? Make sure you wave to your friends." So we were very young when she was teaching us this. I didn't understand it when I was a child, but she was teaching us a sense of social justice, empathy, and our connection with the human family by making us aware of what was going on in our environment. These were the type of activities that my parents incorporated into our upbringing. This is the foundation of a lot of my family dynamics. So it's not strange that I evolved to become the 5%. It's not strange that I evolved to get to the point where I understand my natural divinity, my connection to my people and the human family, and my role and responsibility in teaching civilization to others. That is just a part of my trajectory and my journey. But everyone has their trajectory and journey. Everyone has their different type of family dynamics and upbringing. And some people arrive at the same conclusion, some people don't. But this is just a part of my story and why I'm orientated the way that I am. I had the benefit of seeing the importance of adults investing in the youth. So I didn't have to be convinced about the importance and the value of youth advocacy. I am the result of adults of investing in youth, not just from my parents, but other men and women that were in various different places within our community, spaces or positions that invested in me as well as my peers and my siblings and their peers growing up. I am the result of that investment. So I understand the value of that. Some people have never seen that before. So, youth advocacy, community outreach, volunteerism, all of these things where you're giving of yourself and investing in others. Some people have never seen that before, so they question the real value in that. And unfortunately, it's a lot of us as males or men who've never seen that before or have benefited from that before. So when it comes to these spaces, when it requires volunteerism and sweat equity, where you're investing your time to be in a space consistently, working with youth or youth advocacy or community outreach, you don't see a lot of males in those spaces. It's primarily dominated by women. And one reason is because a lot of us as males or men have never seen other males or men in those spaces advocating for social equality. True indeed, Queen. That wasn't my experience. So my parents, they were aligned with revolutionary thought. You know, when you talk to elders that grew up in the 60s, it's always good to ask their perspectives about how they saw certain events that occurred during that time period, or their perspectives on certain people during that time period, because it gives you an insight into how they leaned or how they were aligned. For example, when Martin Luther King was here, there was a lot of black folks that saw him as a straight troublemaker. As nonviolent as MLK was, there was a lot of black folks that didn't talk to him. They didn't want nothing to do with him. They thought he was a troublemaker and he was messing up stuff for black people. There were some people in our community that genuinely felt that way. Some of them are our relatives. That really had that perspective about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And when you talk to people who were around during that time, you get a sense of the social backdrop and the reason why they felt the way that they did, or why they thought the way that they did about a person like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You had others who would have been aligned with El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. There were some who were advocates of him. You also had some people that was like, oh no, he's too radical and militant. I don't want nothing to do with that Muslim. So you had some that had that attitude. You had some that didn't mess with either of them, and they were more aligned with what the Black Panthers were doing. So it's good to talk to our elders, especially those who grew up during those time periods, because you get a greater sense of their sentiments, their perspectives, how they felt about different events as well as people during that time period. It's kind of like, as positive as the Cosby Show was, when you look at the episodes of the Cosby Show, which was a family that grew up in New York during the time period of the golden era of hip hop, you see maybe one episode that has direct hip hop elements in it. And it was an episode where Stevie Wonder was on there, and he was teaching one of the children how to use a sampling device. But yet you have this family with a doctor and a lawyer as parents, living in New York City at that time, so insulated that there is not even a hip hop influence in that family. You don't see any elements of that in that series, regardless of how popular it was and how positive it was. You didn't see certain elements represented in that, which means if you're looking at it as an actual family, they grew up very insulated. Really disconnected from a lot of the things that were going on at that time, shaping that family and the events of that family. There weren't a lot of conversations in that household about hip hop. Or any of the children dressed in clothing that would be considered hip hop clothing, or even invested in different elements of hip hop, like graffiti writing or beatboxing or rapping or DJing. You saw no real elements of that at all throughout that popular series called The Cosby Show. And I bring that up because that is an example of how a lot of families grew up and how they saw life through the lens of their experience. That's not isolated. You have families like that growing up all around the country that really weren't connected to what was actually going on. Yep. And you got 5%ers all around you in your neighborhood, and there's no elements or influences at all in your show. So you have a lot of our families that grew up that way. Or there are aspects of your family's experiences that you may have never learned before because you didn't ask the questions. You never engaged some of your elders. Not knowing that they may have been into certain things or studied certain things. I have a book right now from my grandmother that's about using mind power, the magnetic mind, and creating thought forms and public speaking and a lot of these different sciences of life. This is my grandmother's book. And I have a few other books. I got books from my old earth, my mother. So I point these things out because a lot of times it is the most undetected by the naked eye and things that we would consider to be insignificant that are the seedlings of revolution. Those simple, oftentimes unobserved acts are the real seedlings of revolution. I think when people consider revolution, they visualize it as protest or a lot of outward action, things that are visible. You know, the the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol building, like that's revolution. You know, all of those various different outward acts or expressions. Even if you're talking about a movement such as the Underground Railroad, or even uprisings that were planned on plantations. Any kind of outward act or expression that you may deem or qualify as revolution always originated inwardly. Any type of subversive movement, something that's designed to undermine or overthrow a system and to replace it with another system, has always operated in darkness or under the cover of a person observing what's actually going on. When you think about the American Revolution, it started undercover. When you think about the Civil War, started undercover. All of these acts and events were planned, oftentimes in a lot of secrecy. Because when you're talking about revolution, you're talking about acts of warfare. And whenever you have acts of warfare, you have a general that's present, who is the commander of those military units. You have a general. So now what does all of this mean? When you understand military strategy, and particularly the role of a general, you also get a greater insight into whether people are operating within the parameters of revolution or military strategy, or if they just talking shit. And unfortunately, a lot of these people that you see online, they're not military strategists. You can tell they have not studied any general in history. And a lot of things that they're advocating online or encouraging people to do or to say is questionable whether or not they are doing it out of ignorance or if they're really working for some type of agency in order to get people caught up. Some people do a lot of talking, and a lot of the things that they're talking about is not military strategy. When was the last time that you've ever seen two countries planning to go to war and you see the general going live or sharing all of their strategies and telling the other country what they're about to do? When have you ever seen that before? Where they're going to give their playbook to their nemesis or to their enemy. Generals don't do that. When you study the history of Saladin, one of the things that you learn about the taking of Jerusalem in 1187 AD is a military strategy that Saladin did, where he conquered an army by leading them to a place called the Horns of Hittim, which was way out in the desert. It was crazy the strategy that Saladin used in order to overthrow this army. He got them to think that he was taking a different route, and he led this entire army way out in the desert where a lot of them almost perished just because they didn't have the basic essentials to survive that type of environment. While at the same time, Saladin's army was ahead of them and was doing stuff like burning bushes, creating smoke screens, which made it even more difficult on top of the type of terrain that they were on. By the time they got to the point where they met Saladin's army, they didn't have the energy. They didn't have the attitude. They didn't have any of the things that are required of an army in order for them to even fight. It's military strategy. Saladin didn't announce that before he did it. Just like if you watch a football game or a basketball game and they interview the head coach before the game or even at halftime, whether they're winning or losing, and the journalist asks, "So what are you going to do different this half of the game?" They don't sit there and pull out a whiteboard and show exactly what they're about to do. They give some ambiguous, general statement about we gonna work harder and on defense and this, that, and the third, but they ain't giving no strategies. So when I see people on social media and they're talking all loose about what it is that they gonna do and all of this other type of stuff, that's my first indicator that, number one, you're not a revolutionary. And you damn sure ain't no general because you talk too damn much. You talk too much. And the talking you doing is going to get somebody else hurt or jammed up because either you are being paid by an agency, some type of agency to do it, or you're just that ignorant that you don't realize that revolution doesn't happen that way. Revolution happens in those unobservable, simple acts that we oftentimes look at as insignificant. Let me give you an example. Growing a garden is revolution. Gardening is revolutionary. Learning how to fast and to abstain and master your physical form is a revolutionary act. Investing time with your family is revolutionary. Donating to an organization or an institution that aligns with your principles and your values and your ideas, and they have evidence of that work, that's revolutionary. A relationship is revolutionary. Choosing to take control over your diet and striving to eat the right foods is revolutionary. Moving from a sedentary lifestyle and being more active and involved, exercising, that's revolutionary. Helping get somebody employed, helping put somebody in a position so that they can actually create the means to establish food, clothing, and shelter for themselves as well as their family. That's revolutionary. These are just simple things that people oftentimes overlook, and they're basic things that people overlook and they don't categorize it as revolution because we're fed this illusion or this misconception that revolution is this big, large, observable thing where somebody's dying on a hill. Yeah, that could be one part of it. That could be one part of it. But revolution is also building a hill that others could stand on. Revolution is owning property, investing in a home. So when I see people with these long, drawn out discussions about what people need to be doing and what they don't need to be doing and what's happening on other planets and we got aliens amongst us and all this, that is not revolutionary thought. None of that is revolutionary thought. And unfortunately, we live in a society of clickbait and headlines and content created to grab attention. And all of the things that I just mentioned that are revolutionary are not attention grabbers. I'm literally not, right as I speak, building an institution, the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. And I consistently share public updates, especially for people who support my renovation project. I want you to literally see what you're supporting. I got some people that they acknowledge it and they like, yo, that's good. You know, I support you and stuff. But you'll be surprised how many people just act like I ain't doing nothing at all. Or they're jealous. Whatever it is, it doesn't get a lot of attention from people. Now, if I got on here and posted that I just cut my finger off doing some bullshit, or uh, I just contracted some type of sexually transmitted disease, um, or something tragic happened and all this other type of shit, people would love to see that. Algorithm, algorithmic bias. People would love to see just negative and ignorant stuff. I share that I'm growing a garden and I'm showing you what I'm growing in that garden and some of the uses of the plants that I'm growing. That ain't really, that ain't nothing. People want to see somebody fighting online. They want to see two women fighting and they shirts get ripped off. Or some child cussing out some adult. Like people are drawn to that type of negativity. And another part of revolutionary thought is being able to discipline yourself and to reconstruct your relationships, not only with others, but also your relationships with social media and the internet. Some people don't have that discipline. I strive to be aware of certain things that's going on or certain trends. I teach youth, so I need to be aware about a lot of different things. They teach me about a lot of different things. But I strive to stay aware to the point where, number one, it's on my own terms and I'm not losing a lot of time searching for something that doesn't exist. That I remain focused on the things that really matter. When I'm not online or I'm not sharing things that I'm doing to help inspire, empower, and educate people, I strive to be present where I am. So I'm not giving a lot of like on site commentary. And I don't do that a lot. A lot of on site commentary where I am or anything like that. I may share some things before or after, and once in a while, I may share where I'm at and what I'm doing in the present, but I strive to be present all of the time. But the real work, the real revolutionary work, are the things that people really don't observe, that they really don't look at as credible or valuable. Hmm. So there's a big difference between revolutionaries and neverlutionaries. And one of the indicators of a neverlutionary is that they're always talking. They ain't got nothing to show for. Always talking. I mean, if I'm sitting up here doing 2 and 3 hour videos a week, twice a week and stuff, going live and just sitting around talking to people. I mean, that should show for something. Not even telling people what I'm doing, but there should be some evidence to show and prove this is what I'm talking about is based upon. These are the projects, programs, and initiatives that I'm actually invested in. I'm not just sitting here running my mouth, y'all. But these are Neverlutionaries. 5-10 years from now, if YouTube is the premier platform people use, or some of these other different social media apps that people go live on, if that's the premier thing that people use, people are going to be saying and doing the same thing that they was years ago, because they never really had an intention of doing anything to begin with. I consistently tell people, if you're going to get on here and create a podcast, or you want to be on here talking and stuff like that, you better be living a life that is worth talking about. Because if not, you're going to run the risk where now you're ambulance chasing content. You just looking for some shit to talk about. You looking for some people to talk about, because you're not really living a life of value. If you're living a life of value, there's always something to talk about or share. When I started doing vlogging, when other people weren't doing it in terms of my niche of teaching knowledge of self and things along those lines, I didn't get on here just to start talking. I was already doing stuff within my community. So I thought to myself, you know what? I think about things sometimes, and I wanted to amplify these thoughts that are linked to the things that I'm actually doing. So from that time, back in the early 2000s, I've consistently shared videos that are always evidence of what I'm actually doing in life. I've never had to chase an ambulance. And that's the reason why I rarely, if ever, speak about current events. I let people who ain't doing shit, that always got something to say, talk about those things. And that's what they create their platforms and their podcasts based upon. Just talking about current events, shit that's going on right now. They have this unique perspective that nobody else has about what's going on with this. And people create personas around that shit. Let me give you the scientific breakdown about Mike Tyson punching that dude in his face on the airplane. I'm gonna give you the high science to talking about what happened on the Super Bowl, or I'm gonna break down the lyrics to this song that nobody else has shown you before. Bullshit. None of that shit is revolutionary. None of it. It's entertainment. And if I ever look at it, I'm looking at it from the perspective of entertainment. It's stagecraft. It's theatrics. Because people really don't got shit going on in their life. Because if they did, they would always have the capacity to talk about something current that they're doing in terms of a project, program, or an initiative. But you never see evidence of that. Never. You just hear them talking about current events, talking about some gossip that you see in the gossip columns, and they always got some kind of perspective on this or that. You rarely hear me do shit like that. Rarely. I deliberately don't talk about certain things when it's a so-called hot topic. I deliberately don't do it. And I know sometimes people want to know what my perspective is. I mean, if I'm building with somebody that's close to me, there's a book called Saladin that you could look up. But I'm not into none of that shit. And that's the reason why I can always create content, because I'm always doing something. There's always something to talk about and discuss. Because this platform is just a routing device back to reality. Some people really ain't doing shit. So they just sit around and talk to a bunch of other people who ain't really doing shit. And in reality, nothing's really being done. Nothing's really being done. These are Neverlutionaries. And unfortunately, when I call shit out like this, obviously people who are doing it don't like it. And whenever I stop working long enough to look up and to see who's talking, every now and every now and then I hear some criticisms about what people think I am or I'm not doing. And it's funny because I usually don't respond to any of it. I listen though when I do have an opportunity. I've heard before that I'm arrogant. And there's usually never women that tell me this. And that was something that was that was telling for me. I've never heard women come and tell me like, Saladin, you're arrogant. It's always been some dudes who've said that. And I've asked them, well, what is arrogant about me, or asked them. And I explore those ideas. I explore those ideas. But when you think of arrogance, arrogance is an exaggerated view that a person has of themselves and their self-importance. So I don't exaggerate shit. As a matter of fact, I present things in much more of a humble way than maybe I should present things. If I tell y'all I've written 23 books, there's no way to exaggerate that. Either I did or I didn't. you know? But those who are actually doing the work, they don't have a problem with the things that I talk about or what I'm doing, because they can see themselves in me. But those that don't see themselves, or they may feel uncomfortable striving to see themselves in me, that really exposes, what a person can do to be much more effective in their life and enhancing the quality of life for those who are around them. In New York, every second week in June, we have our annual Show and Prove, which is an educational and science fair that started in the 1970s. That's about advocating for our youth and showing the work that we've done throughout the past years. Basically, the single largest gathering of 5%ers each year. And it's become, at least over the last few years with the pandemic and a lot of unsurety going on with that, and a lot of people who passed that were primary educators and organizers of the Show and Prove, or people not being involved or invested, is going through some changes. But for well over a decade, I've always attended that as a volunteer because it happens the second week of June. I'm still in my school year. So I usually don't go for like the weekend or anything like that. I usually get there early that morning for the event so that I can meet the organizers there, so I can help set up and do everything that I need to do throughout the course of that day. And throughout the course of the day, I come in contact with people, but I'm there to volunteer specifically. And then when it concludes, I jump right back on the bus and I come back home so that I'm well rested for the school day on Monday. I've done that consistently for well over a decade. I just go to volunteer. I never go to that event dressed up so I could take pictures, and I don't do shit like that. That's not how I move. What you see me wearing right now, I got my Atlantis school hat. I got my museums are not neutral, this old shirt. I go wearing something like this. I don't go buy new sneakers or new clothes and stuff. So I'm still presentable and clean, but I'm just not there for cosmetic reasons. Other people do that kind of stuff. I don't go for that reason, to be seen and to take pictures. I'm a very practical person, and because I move that way, I think a lot of times it's problematic for some people. Number one, people may think that this shit is fake, that I'm fake humble. People that don't know me may think that. That how could I be this influential or doing the things that I do and be like this? You know, it's kind of like how Bill Gates dresses and the things that he does. Like sometimes people don't associate his influence and the things that he's doing with just the practical, simple life that he leads. I'm the exact same way. I don't walk into rooms like I gotta be seen and shit. And even when I don't care if you go back and look at my social media from 7, 8 years ago, you won't find a bunch of pictures or videos or anything like that, me wearing corporate brands or me promoting sports teams or anything like that. I don't do that. That you can look at videos that I did 10 years ago and won't see me wearing sports teams or promoting different type of brands and labels and all that other shit or certain type of sneakers and all that. I don't do that. I've never done that. That has never been something that makes me who I am. With some people, they associate brands with value, even though most of the time they have no stock in those companies and they're not an official brand ambassador. This ain't no Tommy Hilfiger shirt. This is a shirt with a message. This is my Atlantis school. I've always been like that. And if I wear something specific, it's usually from someone that I personally know. And it's something that I'm deliberately striving to promote as a brand ambassador. I had this mindset before I even got on YouTube, before I started social media. And that's something, again, in terms of Neverlutionaries. It's kind of difficult to go against the system if you constantly out here promoting all of the elements of the system and the sports teams and the entertainers and all this other stuff, the different type of brands. You ain't really about that life. If every time you come on screen, you got to have a crisp Yankees hat on, like they don't care about you at all. And you're not on their website as an official brand ambassador. What are you doing? That's not revolutionary thought. Y'all trying to be brand ambassadors and you're doing it the wrong way. I say about a decade ago, when I, well over a decade ago, I got together with some people and they wanted to meet and organize like an event. And they had a meeting because they wanted to meet. And that turned into organizing another meeting because we had to meet again about things that we didn't meet about the first time. So we had that other meeting to meet about the things that we didn't meet about last time that we should have met about the first time. And now we were meeting about those other two meetings. And in that meeting, we talked about why other people weren't there to meet and what we needed to do in order to organize another meeting. So I started to see how a lot of times people are not really about the work. They just want to talk. And the trick with social media is people get psychologically rewarded for just saying they're going to do some shit and they never do it. I can't tell you how many people I've seen talk about they're going to be writing their own book and publishing this, that, and the third. That shit was 5 years ago. And if I wanted to, I could publish a book next week if I wanted to. And we're connected. They know me. They know my capacity and what I'm able to do. But they're more interested in getting likes and loves and congratulations about some shit that they didn't even do, that they don't really have an intention on doing. They just wanted to feel good about the type of social strokes that they're going to get with social media. That's the trick. And a lot of people are into that. They get online and just share things that they really don't have no intention on doing. If I share something, it's usually already done. I'm just giving y'all notice. It's really already done. So when I saw people with that mentality, I realized that I have to be more guarded with my time because I'm definitely not going to waste somebody else's time. I bring too much value to that equation. So if I have 5 minutes to talk to somebody, that's valuable 5 minutes. So I'm not going to waste nobody's time. I had to learn that I can't allow other people to waste my time because they're just interested in talking. They're not interested in work. Years ago, I was having this conversation with a brother that was talking about starting a tutoring program for youth and how they needed to get extra help, in the school system and all this other stuff and blah, 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 blah. And he was just going on and on and on about it and then talking about grants and everything else. And we're standing in proximity to a dollar store, which is also a short distance to the local library. And eventually I stopped them and I said, well, you're employed, right? Yeah, I'm employed. I said, well, the dollar store is right there. You don't need a grant. You can go buy like paper and pencils and other materials that you would need for a program. And then you could also get a background check as well, because if you're going to get youth involved in a program like this, it would be good to be able to show this to parents and guardians and other adults who you want to get incorporated into this program, that you don't have no criminal background, that you have good intentions on what you're striving to do, and you can actually utilize a local public library because it's for the public use, to actually hold your program, so you ain't got to rent no space or nothing like that. Simple. Simple. That program never existed. That person never did that program. And I gave them a simple formula in less than 10 minutes on how to successfully create a program. Simple. So there's a lot of people that think that way. You know, the actual solution is the problem for some people. They may talk about this is a problem, that's a problem, this is a problem, and all these other things, but then when the solution's presented to them, you realize that, yo, the solution is actually the person's problem. And because I'm a solutionary, I operate in such a way where I'm always thinking about how can I help enhance the quality of life of this person that's in contact with me. You know, all of the things that I share are things that you can take and apply to your life immediately. Immediately. I mean, the other build that I did about the occult and things along those lines, yeah, you got to do some research and pick up some books and stuff like that in order to get some real in-depth insight into some of the things that I was sharing. But for the most part, what I share is just straight practical stuff. Practical stuff. It ain't no sleight of hand. It ain't nothing magical. It ain't nothing that, I got to have a big green screen backdrop and all of this other stuff going on that people like to use to hide the fact that they're really not doing shit. I create something that is straight, practical, simple, and direct to the point. And again, a lot of times people don't like that because it exposes them. It's just like being at the workplace. When you are at the workplace and you're the person that is really dedicated and invested in doing their job, the people that's bullshitting, that's put more time and effort into how not to do their job, they ain't really gonna like you like that, because you're gonna expose the fact that they're not doing shit. And then what they start doing is creating this game of pin the tail on a donkey. They start nitpicking and striving to find things that are minor about the things that you're doing to take attention off of themselves, because they're not doing shit. They don't want nobody to see the fact that, oh my God, you just talking. You just sitting around. You ain't doing nothing. So they use a lot of divisive and diversive tactics in order to get attention off of them, because that's what people do at the workplace that don't want to do shit anyway. They just disappear. Or they've mastered the art of trying to look busy, but over a certain amount of time, you realize that someone's not really doing anything because of the lack of productivity. And that's what I mean. You got people on here doing hours and hours of videos or talking or just all this other shit. Eventually, you're going to have to show people what you are actually doing. You're going to have to show people. And the funny thing about it is because since people who do this type of shit were never doing anything to begin with, if they ever got to the point where now they're striving to show that they're at this event or they're involved in this project, program, or initiative, it's going to look so damn out of place because it's going to look so diametrically opposed to them sitting around talking shit. It's going to expose the fact that they never were doing shit to begin with. It's like me. Those of you who are connected with me on social media and have seen my content that I share for all of these years and projects, programs, and initiatives that I've been involved in. And you see that I'm not a materialistic person. I never posted, yo, I got these clothes, or yo, look what I'm driving, or I've never done shit like that. Yo, if I start posting shit about look at my whip or look at my rims, and I'm, you know how DJ Khaled and shit be like, yo, get the shoes. Get the shoes. God did. And he doing all of this kind of shit. If I ever got to the point where I'm doing that shit now, y'all who've been connected with me for a while, y'all gonna be like, yo, that shit is so damn out of place. This dude never been on no wave like that. Like, what the fuck happened? It's gonna be obvious that I'm on some shit. And it's the same way with these people. These ambulance chasers. They always got shit to talk about in terms of current events. But there's nothing of evidence that they can show you that they're literally doing in their communities or in their life. Nothing. Nothing. And that's the reason why they may start off with having guests and doing some content and sharing things that may be pretty insightful, but they eventually run out of steam because the foundation wasn't sure to begin with. You really have to be rooted in life. You really have to have a life worth living in order for you to really broadcast and create content based upon your life. If you don't have a life worth living, you have to make up content. You got to make shit up. And that's what people be doing. It's like people that you see who create comedic content. You see some people and you can genuinely tell that they're a funny person. It don't matter what they're doing in life. They're genuinely funny. And they're always coming up with skits or just content or commentary that's funny because they're genuinely a funny person. But you also see people and y'all not funny. You corny. You're corny. And you trying to create shit that's funny. So now this corny person becomes a content ambulance chaser because they got to constantly make shit up in order to be funny. People do the same thing in various different arenas. You got people that think they conscious and woke, and they're not. They're corny too. They got to constantly make shit up to strive to sound like they're intelligent and they're insightful and they're woke and conscious and all this other stuff. And eventually you see that it tanks. There's no consistency there or continuity because they're not really living that life. They're not really living that life. So they got to constantly make shit up. These are Neverlutionaries. And we need to be clear on who's who in the zoo. Be clear that some stuff is just basic entertainment. It's not anything to really enhance your quality of life. It's not anything that's really going to help you figure out how to be a more effective partner or to get closer to your children or how to be involved in your community, or it's nothing for that purpose. And me talking like this, it's triggering to some people, honestly, because some people are not really invested in the work, because the work itself, there's no awning sign attached to it. There's no billboard signs attached to the actual work. A lot of times people don't acknowledge you. It's a lot of thankless work. It's work where you really don't see results a lot of times until maybe years later. When people reach out to me and they thank me for stuff that I'm doing from around the world, or they send me emails or DMs or inboxes and just acknowledge the type of influence or impact, I'm thankful for that, because I realize, like, yo, it's not often that people tap in and they see the actual work that's going on. When you see prize fighters in that ring and they win a bout, or you see athletes that win a championship, whether that is in baseball, whether that is in football, basketball, the real work that helped them get there are those early mornings and late nights, those sacrifices that they made, where the cameras are not on, or the things that they did that helped them build the integrity and the fortitude to be able to make it to that place in their life. Those times you don't really see those. There's really no evidence a lot of times of those important times where the work actually takes place. And it requires a lot to be able to press on and to continue doing that type of work that is oftentimes thankless and people don't acknowledge it. And for you to be to the point where now people might be aware of some of the things that you're doing. A lot of the stuff that, I mean, I always strive to share a lot of my origin story, my backstory, and things that I'm presently doing, because I want people to see, like, this is about continuity. It's about sustainability. This ain't about coming on here just running my mouth or trying to sound smart and intelligent and shit. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. If I can't show you something in actually in life that I'm doing, what I'm talking for, all of us could talk, but there's no real evidence that what I'm talking about works. If it works, you should see evidence of the work. And we've moved past the place where people are just setting up platforms, running their mouth. Because it's always going to get to the point where people are exposed that you're just a talking head. You just running your mouth. Your actual life is not an indicator or evidence of the shit you talking about. People get on here acting like and talking like they're a scholar, but they don't have one book to their name. They don't have any academic paper attached to their name. They've never spoken at one university, but yet they on here. And some of these people be on here like they professional and they're intelligent and they smoking weed at the same time. And I know it may be legal on a state level in some places and stuff, but in terms of professionalism, I don't know what college or university, unless you Snoop Dogg, gonna have you come there lecturing and giving a workshop or a conference, and you got that kind of etiquette that all of us could see. And here's the thing: some of the people that have strived to sneak diss me or call me out directly or act like they don't really fuck with me like that. These are people who I could actually help beyond where they're at right now in life. I'm more of an asset to them than a person that they should alienate. And some of these people I have assisted in times of need in ways that maybe they wouldn't share publicly. But that's just the way that it works with some people. At the end of the day, we personally have to take inventory on how we see ourselves, the quality of life that we're living, how we're invested in our families and our communities, what type of work is deemed of value in terms of enhancing the quality of life of others. And our life is always going to be a testimony to that, regardless of what we talk. And with a lot of the type of work that I've been doing, I'm moving into a space where I'm talking less and less, especially to adults. I'm becoming less and less verbal, especially to adults. So before I get out of here, I just wanted to ask, does anybody have any questions for me about anything? You know, we out of this ambulance chasing era, y'all, where people just get on here and run their mouth. We really got to be asking them or looking at, okay, where's the evidence of what you're talking about? And here's another key in terms of revolution: you always have to follow the money. Now, that phrase itself is something that was popularized in the film All the President's Men, which is one of my favorite films, which is about the Watergate scandal, where in the film it was shown how when you trace the money, that's where you see a lot of political manipulation and maneuvering. You see where people stand when it comes to following the money. Now, that's also something that's important to understand in terms of revolution. Revolution costs money. If you're just looking at it externally in terms of weaponry and military might, you have to raise money in order to not only acquire certain resources and materials, but also to train people who are equipped to carry out that revolution. That's just looking at it on an external level, visually. But like I mentioned, revolution is also those acts that people would consider to be insignificant. Gardening is revolutionary. Investing in time with your family is revolutionary. Investing in a relationship is revolutionary. Starting a business, taking control of your quality of life in terms of your health and wellness, moving out of a sedentary lifestyle where you're becoming more active and incorporating exercise in your life, learning survivalist tactics, those and many other things are acts of revolution. They're revolutionary acts. But those acts also cost money. You have to not only be willing to invest sweat equity into those acts, but also finances. In terms of survivalist tactics and learning some of those techniques, you may have to invest in a workshop financially. You may have to buy certain materials in order to try and learn certain things. That requires sacrifice and an investment. So that's also one way to distinguish people who are neverlutionaries from people who are really revolutionary. Where's the evidence of their actual investment, not only in terms of sweat equity, but financially? Where's evidence of that? If they're so invested in supporting and protecting Black women, where's the evidence of you investing in and supporting their businesses? Where's the evidence? If you so invested in the babies are the greatest and all of these other different phrases that you say, where's the evidence of that? Absolutely, Darren. Because if they're not living about what they're talking about, then they're always going to be chasing an ambulance or chasing content to talk about. If you're living a life, you're always going to have something to talk about. It's like you, Darren. You're very comedic in terms of your perspectives in life. That's natural to you. You ain't got to sit around and just write content about something that's funny because you naturally have a funny perspective about things that naturally happen in life. You would really just have to organize the content around the perspectives that you just naturally have. That's different than somebody that's looking around for stuff to make something funny. They always are going to be chasing experiences in order for them to make something up that's funny. You ain't got to do that. So that's a difference. So one of the other indicators that distinguishes a neverlutionary from a revolutionary is investment of time as well as finances. True indeed, DJ Eastbound. I always have different events in my city. I'm a project coordinator for a lot of public art events that's going on throughout the city. So I'm moving around a lot in terms of those public art projects. In terms of public speaking events, I'll let you know, and it may not even be in Niagara Falls, it may be in another area. But I'll keep you informed about that. And if you're connected to my social media, especially my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters page on Facebook or on Instagram, which is at Atlantis Build, I always keep the public informed about projects, programs, and initiatives that I'm involved in, as well as public speaking events. So yeah, that's also something that's a prime indicator That shows you the difference between a neverlutionary and a revolutionary. Neverlutionaries is funny with their money. Revolutionaries will spend $120 on a book that they need. A revolutionary is willing to invest. If they're gardening and they need a specific plant, they may drive an hour in order to get specific type of plants that they want to garden. Or if they have children and they want those children to have access to certain resources, they may invest a certain amount of money or go a certain distance in order to make sure that their children have those resources. That's revolutionary. But a person that's talking, they ain't gonna do that because they just talking. It's funny. I put in the chat my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. This is something that I've been working on for some time. It's an estate that I purchased that I'm converting into an early childhood learning center and after school program. I've been primarily the main person that has financially invested in that. It's mine. You know, I also have a GoFundMe that is available for people if they wanted to support it. And the only reason I created that because I was always against that, you know, but I had to change my mindset because a lot of the things that I started to do, especially a lot of the free resources that I have online with like programs that I've done and made accessible to people, literature, articles, radio shows, animations, all of the stuff that I've done, which is free content to people that they can use in their life that inspires, empowers, and educates them. People started reaching out to me like, yo, I really want to support things that you're doing, like financially support what you're doing. And initially I was on that, yo, I got it. You know, I'm doing it myself, this, that, and the third. And there's a lot of charlatans out there and people just doing stuff, taking people's money. I don't even want to be associated with people like that. So I'm just going to do it myself. But people just kept asking me like, yo, I want to support what you're doing. And I'll just, out of that inspiration, I was like, yo, I'll create a GoFundMe so people can support what I'm doing. But I'm going to be clear and make sure that I consistently give progress updates so people see what I'm doing every single step of the way. So there's never any room for any kind of doubt for a person to say I'm doing this or I'm doing that. So it was through that birthed my initiatives to be able to support my renovation project. But that was over some time. But that is actual evidence to show you, yo, this is what I'm literally doing. I'm financially invested in this. This ain't something I'm talking about doing and I'm showing you some graphic renderings of some idea. Nah, it's a brick and mortar institution. And if you're not aware of it, you can simply go to my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters Facebook page, or you could go to my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters IG page at Atlantis Build and see all their work that I've been doing consistently over time to show people like, yo, this is what I'm doing. If you would like to support, you can support it. And as a 5%er, you would think that a bunch of 5%ers would support this initiative. You would think so, right? That a lot of brothers and sisters that, you know, say that they are living the same type of culture as me, that they would be some of the first ones like, yo, I'm just glad that I never had the mentality to expect certain segments of our people to support the things that I'm doing, because I would be very disappointed. I would be very disappointed if I expected that kind of support. And that's one other thing too, in terms of just revolution and creating projects, programs, and initiatives that would be considered subversive in a sense because it may be undermining or striving to replace some of the systems that are actually in place that you may think that are broken. A lot of times your support comes from unexpected places. Doesn't always come from those who you expect to support what it is you're doing. Sometimes people don't support because they're so familiar with you, they may not see it as something that is of value that somebody that doesn't even know you, that are not connected with you in that regard, may see as value. Lamel Forever says, what are the babies being taught? When you're talking about early childhood education, you're talking about the formative years in terms of growth and development. Um, so if you're a 5%er, in our wisdom degree in the 1 to 40s, it talks about Yakub being 6 years old. Yup, definitely, Ezra. Sometimes they come around, sometimes they won't. Oh well, you still gonna do what you got to do. Uh, so Lamel, when you're talking about early childhood, in that degree, the wisdom degree, when it talks about Yakub being 6 years old and realizing his determined idea, from birth up to about 6 years old is when the brain has its most growth and development. The reason when you see a toddler or a child and their body is disproportionate, they look very disproportionate, their head looks bigger than their body, is because the brain goes through a rapid stage of development in those formative years. It's actually the period of brain architecture. And that is when we're really most influential in children's lives at that particular space in their development. So, in terms of what children are being taught, it's important to make sure that the things that you're teaching them are going to be most impressionable. Things that you will want to be rooted in their brain development in terms of them being set on their not only academic trajectory, but their trajectory in life. It's a good time to introduce children to different languages in that space of time because those ideas become a part of their actual synaptic connections. It's most malleable, like you're saying, and impressionable. So there's some good early childhood development programs that understands this science, and they are exposing children to things in that space of their development years, which should be part and self cultural competence, exposing them to different perspectives, considering food allergies, but exposing them to different type of foods. Because in a sensory way and social emotional development, you're really immersing their brain uh, and through their form in the world, you're introducing them to the world. So in my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters, a lot of the things that the children are going to be taught are based around cultural competence, exposing them to things that they necessarily wouldn't get exposed to in those early childhood learning years, unless they may be from a different culture or in a different society. More than just teaching them numbers and exposing them to letters. So I have my own curriculum for early childhood. And then the same thing is applicable to my after school program that's going to be for adolescents, exposing them to things that they necessarily wouldn't get exposure to at traditional after school programs or institutions or organizations. So yes, you always got to follow the money. That's how you see if somebody's really invested to a degree. It's one thing to talk about you really want to learn about certain things, but it's different if you've actually invested in courses and workshops and conferences and retreats in order to learn certain things. That's a different level of investment. A person still has to apply and implement those things in their life, but at least you can tell that they're putting their money where their mouth is. Some people don't even take it to that level. And you have a lot of people online who are like that. They just talking about a whole bunch of different things, and it's entertaining, some of it. Some of it's tiring because you can see that they're really not doing anything in life. They're just sitting around talking. But regardless of what we're utilizing these platforms for, it's always going to get to the point where there has to be evidence to show and prove what it is that we're saying and what we're talking about. Considering diaspora, should we teach children languages like Portuguese for Brazil or Creole for Haiti? There's value in that, definitely. There's also value in our children learning Chinese, and all children learning Chinese. Agriculture, financial literacy, etc., things of this nature. True indeed. So in my Atlanta School for Gifted Youngsters um, story time series that I do, no, I don't speak Chinese. The story time series that I do, that's on my YouTube channel. Some of the story times that I have on there, I have children who are actually reading the stories. I pay them to do that. So they are compensated for lending their voice to my story time series. It's important as children for them to know that your value translates into something that is tangible. How do you give children access in urban communities? You probably have to articulate that differently. The great thing in terms of language access is, especially because of the pandemic, a lot of resources move to a virtual model. So you can learn languages literally online from someone. How far is a school to completion? I'm just about done. I'm just getting some basic things completed for a fire and safety inspection. So there's just some cosmetic things that I'm doing right now. Yeah, so there's a lot of things. Thank you. There's a lot of things that we have accessible to us, but we have to be willing to invest in it. During the time of the pandemic, I self taught myself. I learned how to file patents with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, as well as to file trademarks. That's something that lawyers don't, some lawyers, a lot of lawyers don't even have the expertise to do. You have specific patent and trademark lawyers. If you're a criminal defense attorney, or you're a family court, family court attorney, they may not know or have no expertise in how to file patents and trademarks. I taught myself during the time of the pandemic how to do that. And I had to invest money in teaching myself that. But now I have that skill. So that's something that I'm qualified to be able to do for other people. Obviously, not just to do it, but that's a skill that I have that I'm able to add on. But it cost money for me to invest in that. It wasn't something that I just learned free. I had to invest my time, and I had to invest finances in learning how to do that. One of my sisters that's in Canada, she took a herbalist course over the time of the pandemic, and she became an herbalist from taking a course that she had to invest in time and financially. Those are revolutionary acts. They were done quietly. There was not a lot of fanfare. There wasn't any awnings or billboard signs announcing any of this. That's the type of work that's significant. That's change agent work. All of this stuff that you may see people broadcasting and saying they're doing, a lot of that is not revolutionary. It's attention seeking. And a lot of it is just based in social media psychopathy. Because a lot of these people are not really connected to no one in their communities. They really don't have any relationships. And how they interact with people online, it shows that they don't even really have a sense of self-control with how they're able to socialize and interact with people in these spaces. A lot of these people are psychopaths. So we got to be very careful and mindful of how we invest our time. I'm very careful and mindful of that. And I will that every time that I'm doing something like this, that can you send me a copy of the manifesto you created for people to understand early childhood development of questions to measure our ability to interact and teach? I forgot what you called it. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's called, what you're referring to, Shaborn. Not sure. Yeah, a lot of those things will have no impact on the community. But see, that's the thing. Some people really don't care about the community. They care about themselves. And I keep emphasizing, yeah, Shaborn, I don't know what that is. I keep emphasizing to follow the money. Because when you start looking into that, you see where people stand. Let me give you an example. I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues earlier, and we were discussing Brittany, the sister that's locked up over there in Russia that plays in the WNBA, right? And one of the things that one of the coaches and other people have been saying publicly is that if this was LeBron James, she would have been home. So LeBron James, really out of shame, responded to his name trending about this. And his comment was she really should consider, like whether she should even come back to the United States, or, whether she's welcome and stuff like that. Right? Now, some people may look at that and be like, that's a real revolutionary stance to take, because America never really cared about black people and all this other stuff. And that you can legitimately make that argument, right? But let's make this argument. If some of these NBA players, men, really, really cared, were really concerned about WNBA players, they would be actively advocating for these women to have salaries that are comparable to theirs, endorsements comparable to theirs, mainstream coverage and attention in terms of their games that's comparable to theirs. How many men in the NBA do you see advocating for women in the WNBA to be getting paid in contracts comparable to theirs? How many do you even see that may even take a even greater stance than that and say, you know what? I don't want that type of contract, because women who are playing the same sport don't even get a fraction of the type of contract that I get. And it would be selfish of me to feel comfortable and free playing this game, knowing that women are not being treated equitably in this sport. Well, that's backwards, nearest. When you say they don't generate the type of views, you can obviously generate what type of views you want. We're in a social media age. You can create views about anything. You can make anything seem important with the right marketing. You can make all kinds of adjustments to make things marketable. But my point is, you don't see these male players advocating in that way when it comes to the money. They advocate for themselves when it comes to money and finances. But if you don't see a person taking a step in that type of direction and saying, hold on, I'll take a pay cut for that. Or I want to make some type of investment in this, or this is not fair that's going on there. When you see the money talking, now you're really addressing systemic change. Does that make sense? Now you start to see where people really stand when it comes to certain issues. A lot of times people just care about what they get. And if it requires them to modify some things in their life, or nah, you know what? It's better if she gets this contract, because it'll be more equitable if she's the one that gets this type of support. You don't see a lot of people making moves like that. So some people may give credit to LeBron James with that tweet about making that statement, but real credit and real value is when you take stances like that. realizing and learning that a lot of these women play overseas in order to supplement their income because they're not making the type of money where they can singularly play this sport like a lot of these dudes do. They got to take some over there. They got to place over here. They got to do more than one thing. Yeah, they can say that. Contracts are based on how much attention they generate. Marketing generates attention. Did you see that little ass toy trophy that the one woman earned for the MVP at the WNBA All-Star game? That's pathetic. Lamel, like these new hip hop artists, got to go through their bumps and bruises to earn the money they making right now, right? In comparison to classic hip hop artists that took their bumps and bruises. The bottom line is a lot of times people just really don't care about what other people. There's no empathy there. There's no real connection there. A lot of times people are not able or not willing to sacrifice things in order for other people to have a sense of equality. See, Nares, you making up a whole bunch of excuses and reasons why a woman doesn't deserve what you paying these males. And that's all bullshit. There's a lot of things that you can do in order to generate attention and to make the WNBA equitable. You can lower the rims. You can do a lot of things like that. Generating attention is all social engineering, social economic engineering. If right now there was a campaign to draw attention away from the NBA, you think that shit can't happen right now? I don't care how many people dunk or how many threes Steph Curry shoots. If there is a campaign put into place that wants to take the attention and the views away from the NBA, that can happen. It can happen with the Major League Baseball. It can happen with the NFL. If attention wants to be taken away from certain athletes, that can happen. It's all social engineering, which equates to social economic engineering. It's not just people don't want to watch the WNBA. Yeah, a lot of people, that's the American way, self-preservation. But that's what's destroying this country from the inside out. That mentality. Exactly. So do the men have to wear women's jerseys like the Black Lives Matter jersey did in the 2020 playoffs would make it more entertaining? I don't know. There's a lot of things that could be done to make it more entertaining. A lot of things. It's not hard. We're entertained by stuff that we see in social media every single day. And that's not hard. But the point is, the real value is taking a stance that has a financial shift that changes systems financially. Is when you see people taking stances like that, that's when you start to see real revolutionary thought, because you're seeing people putting their money where their mouth is. Yep, propaganda. And there's a lot of people that also don't think it's possible. That's why it ain't happening. La Illuminati. I appreciate that. Yeah, reverse engineer self preservation. It starts with children. It's crazy. We teach children, you need to share. And then somewhere along the line, people start losing the willingness and the capacity to share. You need to make up. People offend one another, whatever. We teach children, it's important to make up. And children a lot of times learn that. And then they go on with their day and they start playing again. Somewhere along the line, we lose the capacity to make up. Or it appears as if we lose the capacity to make up. So revolution costs money. It requires some type of investment, not only with sweat equity and blood, sweat, and tears, but also financially. And if people talking revolution and they not showing you how they're invested in those kind of ideas, if they're not invested in no land, or they're not sponsoring children to go on college tours, or they're not helping support a child pay for their tuition at school, or they're not invested in this type of workshop, or it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You ain't really about that life. Shit, if they're just unemployed, that's a question. If they're not even willing to be a tax-paying citizen and to just be basically employed, to use that as a foundation or a platform to invest in projects, programs, and initiatives that they see as changing the landscape where they live. If they're not even willing to take that step to just put an application in and to get a job, or to even invest in starting a, a legitimate legal business that they can invest funds into their projects, programs, and initiatives. If they're not even willing to demonstrate and do that, it's questionable. That person's a neverlutionary. They ain't revolutionary. They just talking. And all of us could talk. Here and there, Richard, I poke in here and there and just share some ideas that I have. But like I mentioned, if you're connected with me on my Facebook page, particularly my Atlanta School for Gifted Youngsters page, as well as my IG page at Atlantis Build, then you'll see a lot of the things that I've been doing. I just don't broadcast everything. Some things I share, but a lot of stuff I'm just in the midst of the work. So it's coming up on 2 hours, y'all. I've been on here longer than I anticipated. But I appreciate y'all taking the time to tune in. If you're interested in supporting my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters, definitely go and check out the page first to see the type of work that I've been doing so that you know for sure what I'm invested in. Thanks for answering. What is your religion? I don't have a religion. I study all religions, though, Richard. Yeah. So I appreciate y'all just taking the time to tune in on this Tuesday evening. And whenever I get inspired to come back on and share some thoughts, I make sure I do that. So y'all have a beautiful night. And thanks again for just investing your time with me tonight. All right. Peace.